My daughter started talking to someone in the walls. I thought it was an imaginary friend until I heard it talk back. Hi. I know how this sounds. I know you're probably rolling your eyes, thinking this is another attention-seeking post. But I swear to you I'm not making this up. I just need someone to believe me before I lose what little is left of my sanity. My name is Karen. I'm 34, single mom, and I moved into this house about 2 months ago with my 6-year-old daughter, Lily. It's an old craftsman-style home, tucked away in a quiet rural town in upstate New York. It was a fixer-upper, but I thought it was the fresh start we needed after everything that happened with Lily's father. The first few weeks were peaceful. Quiet. Maybe even too quiet. But I told myself that was a good thing. No more chaos, no more arguments, no more walking on eggshells. Just me and my little girl starting over. It started subtly. Lily would pause sometimes in the hallway and tilt her head, like she was listening to something. When I asked, she'd smile and say, "It's just my friend in the walls." I laughed it off, thinking it was a coping mechanism. Kids make up imaginary friends all the time, especially after trauma. But then I started hearing things too. At night, when the house should have been still, I'd hear faint scratching in the walls behind her bedroom. At first, I blamed squirrels or mice. But the sounds were too rhythmic, too deliberate, like fingers tapping slowly, methodically. Last week, I walked past her room and heard her whispering. Nothing unusual. She talks to her toys all the time. But then I heard another voice. Deep, male, quiet, but unmistakable. I froze. I stood there, ears straining, heart in my throat, as I listened to a low voice murmur something unintelligible, followed by my daughter's soft giggle. I pushed the door open. Lily was sitting on her bed, staring at the wall beside her dresser. She looked up at me and smiled. "He says he likes you, Mommy." I didn't sleep that night. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was a neighbor's voice echoing through the walls. Maybe my mind was playing tricks on me, stress, exhaustion, paranoia. But that night, something shifted. Lily changed. She became quieter. Not in a peaceful way, but in that unsettling, heavy silence, the kind that makes you want to check if someone is still breathing. She stopped playing with her toys. She didn't draw anymore. Instead, she'd sit in her room, staring at the wall, her lips barely moving, whispering things I couldn't hear. I started sleeping with my bedroom door locked. I don't know why. It just felt safer that way. 3 nights ago, I noticed the smell. A faint, metallic scent in the hallway outside Lily's room. Like rust. Or blood. I followed it, thinking maybe something was leaking from the old pipes. But as I ran my hand along the wall, it was warm. Not room temperature warm, body heat warm. Like someone was standing on the other side, breathing. That same night, I decided to move the furniture around in Lily's room. Maybe I thought rearranging things would break the pattern, whatever that means. When I pushed her dresser away from the wall, I found a hole. It was perfectly circular, about the size of a baseball, carved straight into the plaster. The edges weren't crumbling, they were clean, like it had been deliberately cut. And behind it, pitch blackness. Just a void. But I swear to God, the moment I leaned in to look, I heard something move inside. A faint shuffle. Then a slow inhale. I jerked back so hard I knocked over the lamp. Lily didn't even flinch. She just looked at me and said, "You shouldn't look. He gets shy when people stare." I covered the hole with duct tape and pushed the dresser back. I barely slept. I kept thinking about that voice, the one I heard that night, and how it was deeper than anything a child could imitate. But tonight it got worse. I found a drawing taped to the inside of Lily's closet door. Crayon on paper. Simple, but it sent chills down my spine. It was a picture of our house, except the walls were filled with red eyes. Hundreds of them. Watching. And in the center of Lily's room was a tall black figure, long limbs, no face, crouched next to her bed, one hand reaching into the wall. There was a word scrawled under it in shaky handwriting. Hollow. I don't remember ever teaching her that word. I don't even think she can spell it. I want to leave. God, I want to pack our bags and get the hell out of here. But something tells me it won't let us go that easily. Something tells me we're already inside it, and it's just beginning to wake up. I called a contractor the next morning. Told him it was probably a rodent infestation, just a harmless excuse to get someone to open up the walls. He came that afternoon, a stocky guy named Carl with a thick beard and a cigarette permanently stuck between his lips. I prayed he'd find something normal. Insulation issues, maybe an old squirrel's nest. Anything to explain the sounds, the warmth, the whispers. He started in Lily's room. When I moved the dresser again and showed him the hole, he frowned. "This ain't mice," he muttered. "This looks intentional." He got his tools and began cutting a section of the drywall. As soon as the saw touched it, Lily started screaming. Not crying. Screaming, blood-curdling, full-body terror. Her face turned pale, her hands clenched into fists. She was in the living room far away, and yet it was like she felt every movement of that saw cutting into the wall. "She says you're hurting him," she shrieked. I ran to her, trying to calm her down, but her eyes were wild. She didn't even seem to see me. She kept repeating, "You're hurting him. You're hurting him. He's bleeding." And then Carl yelled from the bedroom, Ma'am? You might want to see this." I rushed back, my heart pounding. The wall was open, behind the drywall. There wasn't just insulation. There was something else. Something wrapped in burlap cloth, wedged between the beams. He reached in and pulled it out. It was a small wooden box, old, carved with strange spiral patterns, and stained at the edges with something dark. The latch was rusted shut. Carl handed it to me with a look that said, "What the hell did I just touch?" I didn't open it. Not right away. My hands were trembling too much. After Carl left, Lily refused to go back into her room. She just stood at the doorway, shaking her head. "He's angry now," she whispered. "You touched his heart." That night, I finally opened the box. I wish I hadn't. Inside was a small porcelain doll, cracked, with hollow eyes and black string tangled around its limbs. But the worst part wasn't the doll. It was the scraps of paper beneath it. They were torn journal pages. Someone's handwriting. Faded but still legible. One line was circled over and over again. "He lives in the spaces between. You feed him with presents. You feed him with fear." Another line, written in a different hand, frantic, jagged. "The child listens. The child obeys. The child becomes his voice." That's when I realized something I hadn't dared admit until now. Lily's not just talking to whatever's in the walls anymore. She's starting to talk like it. And I don't know how much time I have left before she becomes something I don't recognize. I don't know why I hadn't done it sooner. Maybe I was afraid of what I'd find. Maybe I was hoping this was all in my head. That Lily was just struggling to adjust. That the house was just old, that I was just tired. But now that I've seen the box, the doll, the journal pages, I can't ignore it anymore. I went to the town library. It's small. A dusty brick building with creaky floors and one elderly librarian who kept eyeing me like I didn't belong. I asked her if there were any records about my house. She raised an eyebrow. "That place," she said slowly. "You're living there now?" I nodded. Her face changed. Something tightened around her mouth, like a memory she didn't want to taste again. There was a family there. The Davenports. Moved in maybe 7 years ago. Didn't last long. They had a little girl too. My stomach twisted. What happened to her? She didn't answer right away. Just turned, walked into the archives room, and came back with a yellowed newspaper clipping. The headline hit me like a punch to the ribs. 7-year-old Amelia Davenport vanishes from bedroom. No sign of forced entry. There was a photo of the girl. She looked just like Lily. The article said it happened overnight. Parents put her to bed, everything normal. Next morning gone. Window locked from the inside. Door never opened. No signs of struggle. Just missing. Police found scratch marks on the inside of the walls, but no explanation. The case went cold. The family moved away a month later. Rumors spread, mental illness, cult involvement, even demonic possession, but no one ever proved anything. I asked the librarian if she remembered anything else. She hesitated, then lowered her voice. They said the girl had started talking to someone no one else could see. Said he lived in the walls. Said his name was Hollow. I felt my legs weaken beneath me. When I got home, Lily was in the hallway, standing completely still. Her hands were flat against the wall, like she was listening for something inside it. When she saw me, she smiled, but not like my daughter. Her smile was too wide, too slow. Something about it chilled me to the bone. Then she said, "He had another daughter before me, but she wasn't good. That's why he took her apart." I dropped the newspaper in my hands. I'm starting to understand now. This house doesn't just feed on fear. It raises children to carry it further. and I'm terrified that I'm already too late to stop it. I bought a cheap digital recorder. I don't know what I was expecting, maybe proof I could show someone, maybe just some kind of validation that I'm not unraveling. That night, after Lily fell asleep, I placed the recorder on the floor near the hole behind the dresser and pressed record. Then I turned off the lights and left the room. For hours I sat in the hallway, knees pulled to my chest, listening for any noise from inside. Nothing. At around 3 a.m., I went back in and stopped the recording. The room felt colder. Noticeably colder. I checked the thermostat, it hadn't changed. And yet the air around that wall felt like it had been touched by winter. I didn't listen to the audio until the next morning. I waited until Lily was at school. It started out normal, just ambient noise. The occasional creak, a gust of wind outside. Then at around the 42-minute mark, the tone changed. There was a faint shuffle. A slow dragging sound like something brushing against wood. Then came the clicking. Sharp, irregular clicking like fingernails tapping against hollow surfaces. I leaned closer to the speaker, heart pounding. At the 44-minute mark, the sound stopped entirely. Silence. And then a voice. Soft, male, and humanly slow. Karen. My blood ran cold. It wasn't just a whisper. It was wet, like something speaking through a mouth that hadn't used words in years. Something trying to learn how to say my name. And after a few seconds of silence, it repeated it. Karen. The second time, it sounded almost pleased. Like it knew I was listening. Then came something else, Lily's voice. She was supposed to be asleep. But there she was, whispering. Yes. She hears you now. I stopped the recording. I sat there, shaking, staring at the screen. 2 hours, 17 minutes and 4 seconds total recording time. And I couldn't bring myself to press play again. Later that day, I went back to the wall. The tape I placed over the hole was peeled back. Not torn, just gently lifted and folded outward, like something had pushed from the other side with delicate, patient fingers. And written just below the hole in faint red crayon were 2 words. Let me. I confronted Lily. I didn't scream, didn't shake her, just knelt in front of her and asked, "Did you write that on the wall?" She looked at me with glassy eyes and said, "No, Mommy. He wrote it with my hand. I don't know what to do anymore. I'm not sure if I should call a priest, a psychologist, or a demolition crew. All I know is this house is trying to speak through my daughter. And it's getting louder. Something is wrong with the architecture. I don't know how else to put it, the angles feel off. The hallway seems longer than it used to be. Doors lead to places they never led before. Yesterday, I walked into the laundry room and came out into the basement, even though they're on opposite sides of the house. I thought I was losing my mind until I saw the photos. I was flipping through old pictures on my phone, trying to remember what the hallway looked like when we first moved in. In the earliest photo, there were 4 steps from the kitchen to the living room. Now there are 6. And the windows are narrower, taller. That night, I marked the walls with chalk. Just little white lines near the baseboards. In the morning, the marks were higher. The floor is sinking. Or the ceiling is rising. Or both. But worst of all, Lily is changing. Not just her behavior, her body. Her voice is quieter now, but carries more weight, like she knows things she shouldn't. Her drawings have grown more detailed, intricate geometric patterns, impossible shapes, spirals that go in and never end. Her eyes, they don't reflect light the same way anymore. They used to be warm brown. Now, under certain angles, they look black. Not like dark pupils, but voids. Deep, swallowing black. I caught her standing in front of the bathroom mirror yesterday, just staring at herself. Not moving. Not blinking. I asked her what she was doing. She said, "Sometimes he lets me see what he really looks like." I asked her who he was. She smiled, a slow, unnatural smile that felt like it belonged on someone older. He's not a man. He's the space between things. The breath between words. The skin behind the walls. I can't breathe in this house anymore. The air feels thick like syrup. Every room smells faintly of rot and metal. There are cracks forming in the walls, but when I try to patch them, they reappear in other places. And now there are doors I don't remember. Small ones. Narrow ones. Hidden behind furniture or behind closets. I opened one last night, and behind it wasn't another room. It was a tunnel, lined with wood carved into the wall. And at the end of it, barely visible in the dark, was a small porcelain doll identical to the one from the box. Sitting upright. Smiling. I didn't go in. But I know it's waiting for me. Something in this house has teeth. and I think soon it's going to bite. I woke up to the sound of whispering again, but this time it wasn't in Lily's room. It was in mine. I sat up slowly, heart pounding. The whispering was low, fast, layered, like 10 mouths speaking at once from inside the drywall. I turned on the lamp. The walls were moving. Not shaking, moving. Breathing. The plaster pulsed outward and inward in slow, heaving rhythms. Something underneath was shifting, pressing against it like a body stretching skin too tightly. And then came the scraping, not random this time. It was rhythmic, deliberate, like fingers tracing symbols beneath the surface. I ran to Lily's room. She wasn't in her bed. I searched the whole house, screaming her name, nothing. But then I heard something in the walls again. This time it wasn't whispers. It was a voice, soft and broken, not Lily's. Not Hollow's either. It said, "Don't let him finish the name." I froze. And then I saw it. A tiny opening in the base of the hallway wall, just big enough to crawl through. I got down on my hands and knees. The air pouring out was cold. What? Rot smelling. And from deep inside the dark, I heard Lily laughing. I didn't crawl in. I couldn't. But I reached inside, blindly, and my fingers brushed against paper. I pulled it out. It was another journal page. Different handwriting. Shaky. Desperate. My name is Amelia Davenport. I don't know how long I've been in here. He makes me sleep when he feeds. But sometimes I wake up. If you find this, burn the house. Don't try to save her. It's too late once the eyes go black. I collapsed to the floor. That girl, the one from the newspaper. She's still here. Somewhere. Alive. Or half alive. Or something worse. And then Lily stepped out of the shadows behind me. But it wasn't Lily anymore. Her skin was pale. Her neck moved with a slight twitch, like something inside her was tugging at the strings. Her voice sounded layered now, as if something else was echoing beneath her words. She looked at me and said, "He has almost finished his name. When it's complete, he won't need the walls anymore." I screamed, locked myself in the bedroom. I can still hear her, or it, walking through the hallway, humming. A tune I don't recognize, but one that makes my teeth hurt and my vision blur. The house is cracking. The ceiling is bleeding. The mirrors don't reflect me anymore. I think the space between walls is breaking into ours. And when it does, we'll all be hollow. I don't remember falling asleep. Maybe I didn't. Maybe sleep is just another doorway for him. When I opened my eyes, the house was gone. The walls still stood, but they weren't part of a home anymore. They stretched endlessly in all directions, connected by impossible angles, forming a labyrinth of pulsing, fleshy corridors. What had become bone, plaster had turned to skin. And everything breathed. I wandered, calling for Lily. My voice echoed unnaturally, splitting into multiple directions. It felt like I was screaming into a mouth that had no tongue. Then I heard it, the name. It wasn't spoken. It was felt. Pounded like a second heartbeat beneath my ribs. Hollow. When the last syllable rang through the walls, the entire structure shuddered as if something had slithered free. Doors opened by themselves. Shadows slid along the ceiling. And from deep inside the twisting corridors, something began crawling toward me. It was tall. Limbs too long. Body stretched thin like skin pulled over smoke. No face, only a gaping cavity where a face should be, pulsing like a wound. It didn't walk, it folded through space, bending reality around itself. But the worst part, the part that broke me, was that Lily was following behind it, holding its hand. She looked calm, peaceful, empty. I ran to her. I screamed her name. I begged her to come with me. She tilted her head, eyes black as oil, and said, "You kept me in cages made of bedtime stories and lullabies. But he gave me freedom. He gave me form." She lifted her hand, and from the walls behind me, arms erupted. Dozens. Bone-thin, clawed, stretching toward me, pulling me backward. I fought. I screamed. I tore at them, but there were too many. Then, just before everything went black, I saw her face twitch. For the briefest second, something flickered behind her void-black eyes. And I heard a whisper inside my head, not from Hollow, but from the part of Lily that was still mine. "Burn it. Please burn everything." I woke up in the hospital, covered in cuts, shaking. A neighbor found me unconscious in the front yard. The house behind me, a pile of smoldering ash. They say it was a gas leak. They say there were no bodies found. Not even Lily's. But I know better. Sometimes in the silence between my thoughts, I still hear the whisper, "Hollow." And when I close my eyes, I see her. standing inside a wall that doesn't exist anymore, still watching me from the space between things, still humming that tune, still waiting. It's been 6 months since the fire, since they zipped me up in a blanket and told me it was over, since they handed me pills and pamphlets and empty reassurances. People say grief makes you see things. They say trauma echoes in strange ways. They say what I saw was just a projection of guilt, of motherly fear gone too far. But I know the truth. Some nights I wake up at 3:44 a.m., always the same time, with the taste of ash on my tongue and the feeling that my bedroom walls are closer than they should be. Sometimes I hear breathing behind the plaster. Sometimes I don't hear anything at all, and that silence is worse. I've started drawing. I don't know why. I was never an artist. But when I pick up the pencil, my hands move on their own. Spirals. Eyes. Doorways. The same patterns Lily used to draw. There's something hollow inside me now. A space that wasn't there before. A hunger that isn't mine. And in that space, I can still hear her voice. You didn't save me, Mommy. You just brought him with you. Sometimes when I stand too close to a wall, I feel something press back. Not hard. Not angry. Just familiar. Like a hand. Like a welcome. Like a whisper. You were always part of the house. And maybe I was.